Cool. Hi, welcome to Bulletproof Bookkeeping webinars. My name is Seth David. I'll be your host for the next roughly 50 minutes. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a 50-minute hour. It's going to be like therapy, right? We were just discussing that in 97 and Up this week, that we should do that with our clients, right? A 50-minute hour, because the 10 minutes is supposed to be for like taking notes and, keeping kind of track of things. So start doing that with your clients. See how that goes over when you have meetings with them. Anyway, today's topic is QuickBooks Online setup, chart of accounts, bank and credit card accounts, 1 hour deep dive. So I do have a very thick outline prepared for today. I don't even know if, let's put it this way, I'll be impressed if I can get through the whole thing in the hour, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to work really hard to try and get through this and get all the stuff in here. So if I go a little fast, bear with me. I'm counting on the fact that you can watch the recording later on. I always get the recordings up, usually by Saturday. Unless people really overwhelm me with inquiries, like, when are you going to get the recording up? Then sometimes I'll be motivated to get it up sooner if I know a lot of people are kind of looking for it or counting on it, right? So first of all, if you or any of your clients need to set up a new QBO company, reach out to me, because as many of you know, and some of you are already involved in it, I'm working with Brandon's reseller group. And so I would love for you to run that through me. I can get your clients 50% off for the first year on QuickBooks Online and discounts on QuickBooks payments, or even better, sign up with me to be a reseller so you can do that directly for your clients. You might as well, because you're going to be recommending the product anyway. And it also gets rid of the headaches that come with trying to do it through wholesale billing. I did it that way for a long time. This is so much better. So with that in mind, and this just kind of comes up as I'm thinking about, all right, so we're getting started with QuickBooks Online. What's the first thing we're going to do? Well, the first thing we're going to do for a client is set them up with QuickBooks Online, right? Now, next thing, and I realize that I'm preaching to the choir here, so to speak, on a lot of things, but there are also people who are going to be watching the recording and whatnot who may not know everything. So bear with me if some of the stuff I go over here is a little bit sort of elementary. But one thing I want to make clear right up front, because it's been the case for a long time and it's still the case, if you're using QuickBooks Online, it's really built to work well in Chrome. You should use Chrome as your browser to work in QuickBooks Online. Does everybody here know how to set up multiple sessions in Chrome so that if you want to be in two companies at the same time, you can do it? So in Chrome, if you're using Chrome, I'll share my screen because I use Chrome. Okay, so here I'm in a Chrome session. This is Smartsheet, which we're going to be looking at a little later. This is the course, which we're going to be referring to quite a bit during this session. So if I'm using Chrome, I'm in a session here where I'm logged in with my domain because I use G Suite for my business, for Nerd Enterprises, right? So if I go into QuickBooks Online, I'll just go into the QBO test drive. That's where we're going to be spending most of our time today. But let's say this was let's say this was client X, one company, and let's say I have a lot of this where I have customers, clients who own two or more companies, right? And there's a lot of intercompany stuff. And I want to be able to be in both at the same time. So as I'm recording, one intercompany transaction at the same time, pretty much I can jump into the other company and create the corresponding entry on their side. So I could go switch companies, right? But a much better way to deal with that, especially if there's going to be a lot of it, is notice I have these other Chrome sessions. And if you don't have another Chrome session, you can add one. And the only thing you'll need to do if you don't already have it is use or set up another Gmail account, right? So I actually have G Suite for my personal domain as well for SethDavid.com. So that's what this profile is. This is a free Gmail account I created years ago called Hey, it's SethDavid@gmail.com. And I use this whenever I want to do videos on, Gmail features, that sort of thing. And this is actually a client that I set up G Suite for, and I'm still the master admin on that. And every once in a while, he needs me to go in and set up a new email for a new employee or something like that. So I'm kind of like his IT guy, even though that's not my sort of core thing that I do. That's just what I do for him. So this is how you can go in. And so while I'm in the, one company here in my main Chrome session, I can quickly open up another window into, this other Gmail account, and I can go QBO test drive here. And, normally if you did that in the same browser session, it would kick you out of one as you go into the other, right? So this way you can actually be in both at the exact same time, right? So if and there's plenty of information out there, but obviously you know how to find me in Slack and whatnot if you have questions about how to get this set up and how to get it working. But it's a really, really good way to deal with these kind of things, especially, like I said, intercompany transactions is the first thing that comes to mind as one of those times where you're definitely going to want to be able to do this. So use Chrome and learn how to, work in multiple sessions at the same time. It can be handy. Next, use QuickBooks Online Plus or higher. They've changed the plans around recently. So let's take a quick look at that. This is good to know, especially if you have clients who are looking to get set up with it. So over here is the current pricing, okay? Notice there's no more essentials. It's Simple Start Plus, Advanced, and then there's the Freelancer, which was the self-employed, right? And so my feeling is in most cases, anything less than Plus is going to be a waste of time, unless for some reason you really just don't think you're going to need to manage and pay bills, track time, or need the users, right? Or track. This one is the deal breaker right there for me on Simple Start every time, is that I can't track, project profitability. I can't track, I think I can't even job cost, meaning I can't assign customers to an expense in the Simple Start version. And tracking inventory you may or may not care about. Obviously, if it's a service-based business, that's not going to be a deal breaker. But this one is the big deal breaker for me, which is why I almost never recommend Simple Start, because invariably the few times I have, very quickly I end up getting to that place where I'm like, well, we got to upgrade because we need, some feature that's not available in that version. And again, don't, use this to compare the plans to figure out which is the best one for your client. But don't sign up here. Either become a reseller, or if for some reason you don't want to be a reseller, you don't want to deal with that, then please, please, please reach out to me. I can get you or your client set up with QuickBooks Online. Okay. So no more essentials, Simple Start Plus, Advanced, or the Freelancer. And don't use the Freelancer unless you really need to, and you're really convinced that that's all you're ever going to need. Because my understanding is that even now, there's no way to migrate that to any of the other versions of QBO. In other words, if you go with Freelancer, you're stuck in Freelancer. The only way to do it would be to recreate the data in, like a QBO Simple Starter Plus. In other words, only use Freelancer if you're confident that you're never going to outgrow Freelancer. Like if you have an Uber driver client, that kind of thing. So again, I'm showing you, I showed you that so you could compare products, but don't buy it this way. The next thing I want to get into as we're getting started setting up QuickBooks Online is I want to kind of whip through the settings, right? That's the first thing I always do when I go into a QuickBooks Online company. And for that, I think I actually want to switch companies. So when I'm in the test drive, I can't really switch. I have to just sign out because I want to get into kind of like a real QBO setup type situation. So I'm going to log back in. And now we're going to go into one of my sample companies. I'll go into the real estate. Actually, I think I have, yeah, I still have the company for Bulletproof Bookkeeping. Might as well. Seems apropos. All right, so the first thing I do once I've initially set up the company is go right here to the gear icon, and I go through every single nook and cranny of the settings, right? So I go through the company, I upload the logo. When my clients fill out their onboarding form, one of the things I ask them for is their logo. This is the first reason why I want it, so I can upload it here and add it into their QBO company, right? And I just fill all this out, and I go through each of these tabs one by one. There's nothing to do in the usage other than to see, how close you are to the limits. Obviously, if you're in QuickBooks Online Advanced, there is no limit on any of that. So I'll go straight to sales usually there. Customize the forms. If you haven't gotten familiar with this area, you should definitely get familiar with this area. As you can see, you can customize either an invoice, an estimate, or a sales receipt. Nothing else. A lot of people ask, can I customize a PO? Nope, can't do it. Can I customize a bill? Nope, can't do it. This is all you can customize right now in terms of forms. So if you go into the invoice and play around, you can see all the different layouts. You can get in here. It's pretty easy to figure out. It's pretty intuitive, actually, in terms of how to go in, and you can change the templates here, right? And some of these are pretty cool. Most of them, this is the one I actually use for Nerd Enterprises on purpose because I don't want people printing them. So it's got like that whole background color and everything. It's my way of saying save the trees. It'll, this way, if they print this out, it's going to force them to use a lot of ink. So that's my little passive aggressive way of preventing people from printing my invoices. But anyway, and there's lots of little things you can do. Like there's an area where you can add on a little mini statement that shows any past balance, any payments received, and so on. And so I use that in mind. I like that because otherwise what happens is I'll send an invoice and they'll pay that one when there's an older one with a balance due that they don't pay, right? And that drives me nuts. And now I got to go chase them for the old balance. And so I always add that little mini statement onto the invoice. So go through this, learn, get familiar with this, because most of your clients may not care or need it, but you'll get the one client who does. And when you do, you'll be happy that you at least got yourself familiar with this section. Okay, so I'll get out of here. And let's go back into settings. Okay, and so I would just go down the list, go through everything. Sales form content, right? After you get through customizing, what do we need here? If you're not using QuickBooks Online Advanced, you do have 3 very basic custom fields that you can use. These are generic text fields, so just keep in mind, if you're going to use this for something like sales reps, you have to be consistent. You can't have any typos, right? You have to make sure there's no drop down you can set up. It's very, very basic, but it's there. It can be used. And go through each of these sections. If you don't already, make sure you understand what each of these is all about, right? If you're tracking inventory, you want this on. If you're not, you can turn it off and so on, right? And it's just everything in here is something that at some point you're going to want to understand. Most importantly, even if you don't need it now, you're going to want to be familiar with where it is when the situation arises, because it invariably will, that you do need it. You're going to want to be able to remember, oh, I know where that is. It's in the settings, right? Here you can establish the language that goes out with different sales form templates: invoice, estimate, credit memo, sales receipt, statement, refund receipt, right? So you can choose which of these, and you can, create the language. You can use merge tags here. You can see how it's structured with basically you just put brackets around it for invoice number, right? And there's somewhere where I think you can get a list of the different merge tags that can be used in that. Generally, I leave that stuff alone and I just write the message like, pay me now or I'll kill you. Anyway, and then just go through it. Go through the expenses area, right? Here's where you're going to say, I want to be able to track expenses and items by customer. This is really important. It is not on by default, and you almost always want it on, right? This was the thing I mentioned earlier. That's the deal breaker why I won't touch Simple Start, because this option doesn't exist in Simple Start, which means I can't tag customers in expense transactions and track profitability that way, right? Whether or not I want to use purchase orders, default messages, again, this is with purchase orders, right? Payments is strictly for QuickBooks Online payments. Again, don't set it up this way, because through the reseller program, you can get better pricing on QuickBooks payments. So again, if you want to be a reseller, great, you'll be able to get that pricing. Otherwise, ask me about it. Or there's a few other people here who are resellers. You can ask any of us, and we'll be happy to help you with that kind of thing. And then the advanced, right? Here's where you're going to find where you can turn on the, if you want to track classes and locations, right? I always just turn these things on, because even if I don't think I'm going to need them, I like having them there so that it's there if I need it. It's not costing me any extra money to have it turned on, right? All of this, just whip through this, spend time, go through it a lot more slowly than I just did, and spend time anytime you set up a new company going through these settings and make sure that you have things set up exactly the way you want. It's so important. Any questions so far? Okay, everybody's quiet. Perfect. Moving along then. The next thing I want to talk about is the chart of accounts. It's kind of the next thing I usually want to do when I'm setting something up, right? So I'll go to not reports, I'll go to accounting and chart of accounts. Okay, and this kind of comes under the bigger picture heading of the lists, right? But chart of accounts is kind of like a major list. It's where all the accounts are, where all your transactions live, right? And so you'll want to go through and give this some consideration in how you set it up. Some of us even have kind of like a library of standard sets of accounts for clients based on different industries and things. A lot of us do that, and that way you can just import them. It's really easy to do an import. And if you go to the import screen here, you can actually download a sample file. It gives you the exact layout of how you need to structure that import file, and then you can create it and then browse to it from here and import it. The one key thing that you'll need to remember is that in that file, there's going to be a column for the type and the detail type, and spelling definitely counts here. So it helps while you're filling out that spreadsheet that you're going to set up for the import to have QuickBooks Online open to the chart of accounts so that you can confirm exactly how the names of the types and detail types are structured, so you can get it consistent in that file. Otherwise, you're going to get an error when you're importing. But other than that, it's very, very easy to use. And in fact, on my upcoming QuickBooks Online for Real Estate Brokers course, I have a template that I've created to import with all the typical accounts you're going to want to have in a set of books that you're using for a real estate broker. So it's handy to create those kinds of things and easy to build libraries of these sorts of things. If you know, when I have when I have a client in the construction industry, and you know, these are the accounts I definitely want, and income, cost of goods sold, expenses, and so on, you can have that template ready to go so that when you're setting up the QBO company, in a click, you can import it and everything's right there. And then, of course, you can obviously add more accounts as you go and on the fly. Easy enough to do. New. Here you'll choose the account type. The one interesting thing that Greg brought up earlier this week is that normally the detail type means absolutely nothing, with one exception that we're aware of where it does become critically important, which is in some cases, for whatever reason, when you create a new QBO company, it doesn't have that classic undeposited funds account created. I don't know why. Usually it does get created automatically by the system, but Greg pointed out, and I've noticed this too, that sometimes it doesn't get created. So if you're going to do that, then you need to set up other current assets, and then in the detail type at the very bottom is your undeposited funds choice. This has to be the right detail type so that QuickBooks knows to use this as that special system account that's going to capture the undeposited funds, so you can group things in a bucket and record your deposits accordingly, right? Other than that, the detail type serves no purpose that any of us are aware of. It was originally built for tax line mapping, and my understanding, as I mentioned earlier this week when we were looking at this, is that it's not even really used for that anymore. So I still take the time, though, to choose an appropriate detail type for whatever I'm setting up, because I feel like the minute I stop doing it, then there's going to be a need for it. And then I'm going to have to go back and fix everything. So I do it anyway. I take the time to do the right detail type when I'm setting these things up. But setting up a new account is just as simple as that. Of course, one of the first things you're probably going to want to do is set up your bank accounts, right? So for that, the detail type can be checking or money market or savings. If it's a trust account, then you have, like, specifically for rentals, rents held in trust. For any other kind of trust account, just do trust account, right? So, and you can call this, B of A dash 1234. I always like to put the last four digits of the account number in the account's name, especially because a lot of clients of mine have multiple accounts at the same institution. So this helps me distinguish, so I know exactly what planet I'm on when I'm looking at a dropdown, or I'm looking at the balance sheet itself, or anything when I'm even trying to link up the bank feeds to the account. It really helps to have that in the account name. And so, again, creating an account in the chart of accounts is just that easy. If I need to merge accounts, that's very easy to do, although there's no button to click on to do it. You simply rename one account to be the same name as an existing account, and QuickBooks Online will confirm if you want to merge accounts, and then you do it, right? So that's very easy to do. And now let's look at the bigger picture of lists, okay? And before I dive into the bigger picture of lists, I want to point out that this is where in the course, I have a whole section dedicated to all of your lists, okay? Customers, vendors, classes, locations, and others. So in this section in the course, you have all of it, including a deep dive on the chart of accounts. So each one of these is a pretty significant deep dive on all these different lists. And I figured I might as well, just for the sake of those who are totally unfamiliar with QuickBooks Online, or for that matter, who just haven't taken the time to really dig in this deep. But these videos will go through every single nook and cranny of what you can track in a customer, in a vendor. I go through every single tab, every little piece of information you can possibly incorporate into a customer profile is covered in these videos. So since I think just about all of you, if not all of you, are in the course, I figured it would be worthwhile to remind you of what you have access to already, right? All these lists, very, very detailed information in here for how to use them. Okay, things have moved around some. Intuit is doing that a lot. So now we have the sales area, right? And that's, of course, where you'll find customers and any other thing you'll need for customers like products and services, invoices. Once I go into any one of these parts of the sales area, I have access to all of them right across the top here. And sometimes I forget that that's here, and I find myself going back here to navigate to it. And it's like, oh, it's right there. Right, so here's your products and services, okay? And the products and services, another thing you're going to want to kind of set up early on. And essentially, it's a simple question you want to ask yourself. What do I sell? What's the stuff I'm selling? How am I generating revenue in this company? I like to think of this area, if I'm selling inventory, then it's all the different products that I actually sell that I need to set up here and track quantities in. If it's any other kind of business, I just think, what's on my shelves? And I need to describe whatever's on my shelves here in the products and services list, because that's the stuff I sell, right? So if it's services, and what I really like about the way this area is designed is I like using the categories a lot. I use them a lot. In fact, let me switch over to my real estate broker example now. Because here is a good example of, or at least one good example of how I've used categories. So if I go to sales and I go to products and services, all right, we're a little slow today. There we go. So first of all, you get these default items that are really annoying because you can't get rid of them. So what I do is I put them in a category called admin. Sometimes I call it like QBO crap I don't use, right? And that way, once I've done that, I can actually use the filter to filter out, that admin category, not status, but category, right? So I can choose everything except admin. And that's a great way to just get them out of the way. I don't want to see that, right? And now I might want to, did I choose uncategorized? I did. So this way, if there's anything that doesn't have a category, I want to know that, because my philosophy on this is once I start using categories, everything needs to go in a category. Especially because the way this list is structured, it's sometimes hard to tell. It'll look like something's in a category, but it's not. It's just the first freestanding one after that category stuff. It's, they frankly, and I love my friends at Intuit, but they haven't done a very good job of setting up these little structural lines to make it really clear what's freestanding versus what's part of the previous category in the list. But you can see an example of how I'm using this. So for a broker, we have leasing revenue, and then we have the actual sales and purchases of properties, and that's divided up between a buy and a listing, which is when we're representing the seller. Now, how do I create this? Pretty simple. Under more, I can go manage categories, and that'll just take me right into the category list where I can add categories and do whatever I need. Or as I'm creating one on the fly, whether in any one of these types, if I'm doing a service, it's right down here. And if I have a new category I want to create for this particular service I'm setting up, then it's right here, add new, and all it gets is a name. There's nothing any more complicated than that about it. There's nothing else to track about a category other than the name of the category itself, right? So that's all right here. And that's how you can keep your products and services lists really, really organized, right? Any questions so far? Everybody's good? Beautiful. The next thing I want to talk about, setting up opening balances. This is another thing we're going to need to do very frequently when we're setting up a new QBO company for an existing customer. Now, we had a call we did that was kind of a deep dive on this a while back, but the tendency is, all right, so I created this B of A account, and I'm starting it, as of, let's say, October 1st of this year in this set of books. And we started out with a balance going into the month because, again, this is, for an existing business. So everybody wants to book that to opening balance equity, right? I can say new, I can say recorded deposit, right? We'll date this back to October 1st, and it's B of A. Did I not create that? Oh, I'm in a different set of books. I forgot I switched. Let me switch back real quick. All right, so here we'll create a new bank deposit. All right, let's try this again. B of A. We'll get there. There it is. Back this up to October 1st. Now, here's where a lot of us want to use opening balance equity. It's what we did for years. But earlier this year, we went over a new process that I've come up with for how to handle this kind of thing. And that's where instead of using opening balance equity, which creates a permanent difference in the equity section of the balance sheet, that a lot of times we'll just end up closing out to retained earnings. But I don't want to ever touch retained earnings that way. That's part of my bulletproof method, is that retained earnings needs to be kept as a pure number. It needs to only accumulate based on each year's cumulative earnings or losses year over year. I never want to post anything to retained earnings. It just keeps it really clean. So what we're going to use instead is prior period adjustments. Okay, so we're going to create that account, and it's going to be an other expense. Okay, and for the detail type, I really don't care. I'll just call it other miscellaneous expense. And for items from prior periods, and save and close, because that's literally what this is. And so let's say the balance going into October from before we're starting this set of books was, $8,458.62. How's that for just making up a random number? And I'll save that. And what that's going to do when I run a report is it's going to show up at the very, very bottom of the P&L outside of the operating profit. And that's the key here. So there's my profit and loss. So there it is, other expenses. So this way I can still very clearly see the true operating profits of the company, but this will then, come up and it will get lumped into the net income, and that gets closed out to retained earnings. So it gets into retained earnings, but this is the right way to do it so we don't mess directly with the retained earnings account in the equity section of the balance sheet, and or otherwise have this permanent opening balance equity number that's just going to sit on the balance sheet for the rest of our lives, right? That's how we avoid it. It's also pretty clear what this represents. So the person preparing the tax returns will thank you for not messing with their reconciliation of retained earnings, which is one of the first things they always do when they get the next year's set of books to prepare that year's returns, is they reconcile the retained earnings between the tax return and the book. So if you haven't messed with their retained earnings number, they're going to love you for that. So that's how I've started to recommend handling these kind of prior period deals. Don't use opening balance equity. Wherever you might have used that before, use prior period adjustments. It works, and it works real well. So that's how we set up beginning balances. You're going to do the same thing for credit card accounts. If you have to bring in inventory onto the books that pre-existed, the time period, all of that is going to be dealt with using prior period adjustments. Next on my list is sales transactions, right? So once again, in the course, I have a whole section on sales, customers, inventory, and accounts receivable. And in this section, again, you have lots and lots of content, even going into a second page. And this last thing is just a thing where you can give me feedback on how you found the lessons in here. Very few people have done this. A few have. But mainly it's got everything. It covers everything. So for today, I just want to do kind of a quick review of where you're going to go and what you're going to do about creating sales transactions. But here because I'm talking about inventory in this section, I'm going to talk about products and services again. So there's products and services covered in the list. That just shows you how to create them and set them up. This shows you how they're going to get used in sales transactions. I show you the projects area, invoices and sales receipts, services and non-inventory items, and so on and so forth. The bundles I teach you how to use, and then of course receiving payments and clearing accounts. Right, so clearing accounts is something I'm very big on. right? A lot of you know this. Those of you who've done any one-on-ones with me have probably figured that out. It really helps you keep the accounting flow clean and bulletproof, and it gives you the infrastructure that makes it easy to confirm the numbers, to reconcile. You reconcile a clearing account to zero, so you know that everything that came in and everything that went out is accounted for perfectly. Every dollar of sales has to be matched up with a dollar of payment, and that's the formula: is sales minus payments equals zero. And so sales go into a clearing account. Then they clear from the sales clearing into the appropriate payment method clearing, right? So this goes over that. And we've done it in some of our calls as well, going even deeper, right? So everything you need to know about the sales cycle is covered here in the course. Let's review, looking at QuickBooks Online. And for this, I'm actually going to switch over to the sample company. And actually, I need to sign out. And we'll just go to the QBO test drive again. Okay, so as I mentioned, anything related to sales is going to be in the sales area, right? So if I'm going to start posting sales transaction, probably not a bad idea to head over to at least the sales overview here, right? I might even want to go straight to the customer that I want to produce an invoice for, okay? And then once you're here, there's two ways to do, to create a new sales transaction. One way is under new, right? And in this way, I didn't even need to browse to the sales and customers area, but I just find it's a good idea because chances are if I'm producing new sales transactions, there's going to be things I want to do in that area, to verify things, whatever. It's just a good idea. But either way, under new, under customers, I have everything I need to produce sales related transactions, invoices, receiving payments on those invoices. If I want to create an estimate, and creating an estimate is as simple as it looks a lot like an invoice, but it just doesn't post, right? But it's a way of sending an estimate to a customer to get their approval before you're going to do it. And now they've, for a while now, we've had progress billing as a feature in QuickBooks Online. So that's how that process starts, is with an estimate. And then you can bill off that estimate in pieces as you need to. Credit memos, of course, when we want to give customers, we're not going to give them their money back, but we're just going to give them a credit towards a future service or purchase. Right. And then a sales receipt, of course, distinguished from an invoice. This says I'm getting paid now. This says I'm getting paid later. Right. So a sales receipt has a deposit to drop down where I have to be prepared for where the payment for that sale is going right away. In my case, it's usually going to go to some sales clearing account, like I mentioned. A refund receipt is for the situation when we are actually going to send money back to the customer, right? And there's a payment method option in that dropdown. So if I know the money's coming out of my bank account, then I'll choose my bank account. If it's posting back to their credit card, then I'll choose credit card, and so on. Okay, delayed credit and delayed charge. I like to think of these as they're like bookmarks, right? So if I know I want to give a customer credit later on, and for some reason I don't want to do it as a credit memo, I do it as a delayed credit. So it's just there to be used at some point in the future. And delayed charge is the other side of that. If there's something I know I want to charge the customer for, it's like creating a bookmark so that later on I can use that charge and drop it into an invoice or a sales receipt. So that's what those two things are all about. The other way to create new transactions is from within the customer. So notice when I'm in the customer's list, I can't create a new transaction from here. The choice here is to create a new customer, of course, because that's the list that I'm in. I can import customers if I have a group of customers for a new company to import. Customer types is really handy. A lot of us use customer types to describe the referral source. Where did the customer come from? That's a very common use case for customer types. But once I go into a customer, so let's go into cool cars. A lot of people miss this, and I only know this because I've tapped it during a demonstration, and people say, "Oh my God, I never realized that was there." And I'm talking about this little guy here. If you click on that, it expands to a drop-down essentially where you can access your customer list while you're working in a particular customer. So this saves time, especially if I'm bouncing between customers a lot because I'm just working in this area in general. And when I have a lot of customers, I can just use this to quickly search out a customer and click on them to switch over to that customer, right? While I'm in any customer, that's where I can create any new sales transaction, right? I have pretty much all the same choices as I do under the new menu, and a few additional ones, which was it time activity, right? I can create a statement. So those are the ones that don't necessarily appear under customers in the new menu, right? So this is where you go to create any kind of transaction related to a customer, related to revenue, related to how we make money. Okay. Expenses and vendors. Same thing. Okay. First of all, again, very detailed drill down in the course on this. So if you haven't been in the course in a while, dive in because it's all right here. Okay, vendors, how to record expenses, checks, expenses, and credit card charges using products and services in expense transactions. This is important, especially if you have like subcontractors and you want a job cost and that kind of thing, or if you're doing the progress billing thing. I don't know if they have the kind of job cost reporting yet that this area in QuickBooks Desktop could produce, but I have no doubt that's coming eventually. And then, of course, I get into accounts payable reports because that's important. When we're dealing with payables, we want to be able to run reports and see what's going on there. And then this section I have on just useful applications for managing accounts payable. And I could probably add an appendix to this now because there's been a lot of stuff that's come out over the past year or two, even since this was all developed. So quick review, this works very similar to the sales and customers area. You don't have as many things across the top to deal with. I basically have expenses, which is just a list of the expense transactions, and then the vendors themselves. And similarly, I can go to new, and under vendors, I have a list of all the types of transactions I can create for vendors. But just the same, if I click into a vendor here, like Bob's Burger Joint, I can do a new transaction from here. And also I have this same little window that I can expand that gives me a window into my complete vendor list. So it makes it easy while I'm working in one vendor to jump from one vendor to the next. It's just easier than having to click here to go out to the master vendors list and then go find or search them, right? So it saves me a step. Okay, so that's and of course, creating a new vendor, very easy to do. From the vendors list, new vendor, and you're going to fill out the form. It's all very straightforward. I'm not going to make you suffer through watching me show you how to fill out a form. Right? And take the time, go through. In the lists lessons in the course, I do take the time and I go through every little piece of this just to make sure there's nothing you're missing. Because I'm guilty of this where, I just say, oh, this is very simple and straightforward, and I overlook something that actually might be useful. And it's just important, like I said earlier, to be aware of these things so that when the need arises, I know where to go to find them, right? That's where this becomes really important in terms of just getting real familiar with this stuff, okay? And now I want to get into what I had planned on spending the most time on today, which is the banking and bank feeds area, okay? So for one thing, that's the first section of the course. And the reason is because I feel like it's so critically important. And I feel like, especially in these times of cloud accounting software, this is really the core of everything. Everything is ultimately kind of managed through the bank feeds, right? So that's so some people have asked me, how come you didn't start with the lists or something like that? And I said, because this is the core. And because if I'm a business owner who's in a rush to get started and I've got my business running, I need to start here. And then we can fill in the blanks as we go from this part. As I'm downloading transactions, I can add the vendors I need. I can add the accounts I need. So I really felt like this was the place to start because I feel like this is the cornerstone of everything. Okay. So the first thing is setting up the bank accounts, right? So the test drive company is a good place to go to kind of play around with this. It's in the banking area, right? Let's close out of that. I hate these pop-outs that don't go away. So over here, we can link an account, and it's going to take us in, and you're going to find your bank, and you're going to need your logins, and you're going to log in, and it's going to walk you through exactly how to set this all up, right? Very, very straightforward. As long as you have the logins, you should have no problem. It'll connect to the account. It'll ask you which account in the chart of accounts to link it to. It'll also give you an option to create the account you need if you haven't already done so. But obviously, it helps if you've taken the time ahead of time to set up the account in the chart of accounts. So it's just there to be linked to, and so that there's no confusion about it. Okay. Once you do, it's going to download transactions. Okay. And I want to show you something interesting because I'm pretty sure most of you here know how to handle this. And if you don't, it's pretty easy to figure out. If I click in here and I see there's a transaction to Books by Bessie, I, of course, need to know what we pay Books by Bessie for, right? And I don't know, or actually, I'm sorry, we receive money from her. So she's probably a customer. Okay. So, and if I click this drop down, sure enough, there's a vendor for this, which is interesting. So maybe this is a refund we got, right? So keep in mind, it's important to keep up front what the context is of everything, because it's easy. I had this happen with a client earlier today. We chased our tails a bit because she's like, I don't understand what to do with this transaction. We got a loan of 20,000, and we used that to pay off 20,000 towards a credit card. And for some reason, the way she brought it up, we were looking at the payment that went out, but she had me thinking about it in terms of the money that came in, and it got us real confused. And then I kind of like looked up for a second. I was like, wait, this is 20,000 received, not spent. So we were dealing with the money that was borrowed originally, which was totally separate from, it's in a sense, it's totally separate from the fact that that money happened to be used to pay something else specifically. And so that's one of the first lessons in this, I think, that's important is even though you might be thinking about how transactions are connected, you really have to think about each transaction as its own separate entity, right? And that will help you. If you learn to think about it that way, that will help you think through how to record these things much more easily. So if I got money and it's from a vendor, it's probably a refund, but not for sure. Maybe that vendor is also a customer and they're paying us for a service. So I'd have to find this out from the client if it's not clear, if I don't know, right? But if I do know, then it's as simple as filling it out. Who's the payee, the vendor or customer? What account does it go to? If it is a refund from a vendor, then I'm probably going to book this to the expense account that I used when I paid the vendor originally, right? And you just go down the list and add everything in that you need as you need it. If you need to set up the new name, if this A rental is not on the books, which it's not, I can easily add this in, right? Since this is also money received, it's going to assume it's a customer. Let's say that it is, right? So I'll put the customer in there, and I may need to leave it in uncategorized income, but bear with me here. I want to show you a different process than what you're accustomed to as far as handling the uncategorized stuff, right? And I'll explain why I have a slightly different way of looking at this now and what the new approach is. But that's how you do this. You go through this. Here it's finding matches, right? It says I've got a record found. So I still like to look in and confirm that it truly is the right match, because sometimes you'll have multiple transactions for the same amount, but the dates are off. So you really want to check. This is a deposit on 10/9. This is the information from the bank. The deposit actually happened on 10, or this is the information from QuickBooks rather. It's booked on 10/9. The bank has it on 10/9. It's the exact same amount. So we can just confirm that in as a match. For that matter, if I'm confident that all these are accurately matched, then I can just check off the lot of them, right? And I can accept them, okay? I'm not going to do that just now because I want to show you something else. And this is where the new kind of process for uncategorized comes in that I've started to employ. Because one of the problems is typically what we've done is we dump this stuff into uncategorized income for money coming in and uncategorized expenses for money going out. And we send that to the client, whether it's in a report form or a spreadsheet or whatever. And the client says, yeah, I'll get back to you on that. And 6 months later, we now have 6 months worth of uncategorized stuff. And now it's November and they're like, hey, I need my books done. And you're like, well, hey, I need my uncategorized stuff answered, right? They don't really feel it because by adding it in as uncategorized, at least we got the banking side of it done, right? So we've got the accounts reconciled and they can see an accurate amount of money that they have in the bank account. But one day I was playing with this and I actually really like this. So here's an export option. This allows me to export whatever's sitting here in the bank feeds. All right, so here's an iteration I did just testing it earlier. So I'm just going to save a new one with the number 1 in there. Okay, and I'm going to click to open that up. Okay, let's assume I've already added in and matched everything that I know how to handle. And so this is the remaining stuff. I'm going to try and drag this down to my screen if Excel will be kind enough to let me. I clicked the close file thing. Okay, let's try that again. Open file location. That's one of my favorite things. Okay. So now I'll go in here, and it just gives me, exactly what we were looking at there in a spreadsheet version, right? Now I could just send this to them, but I have a better idea. Here's what I want to do. Because I want to be able to collaborate with them. There may be, this may take some time. There may be some back and forth, and I don't want to email an Excel file back and forth with the client. So I want to put it somewhere where we can truly collaborate on it. And so Smartsheet is kind of the perfect way to do that. So let's create a new Smartsheet. And a few people have been asking me recently, like, oh, you haven't done any Smartsheet in a while. So here it is. All right, so I'm just going to create a new blank, and we're going to call this client Y uncategorized. Okay, and this is going to be really simple. Okay, ignore the primary column for starters, and I'm going to use the columns right from the spreadsheet to set up all the rest of the columns. Okay, so over here I'm going to have date, and of course the type is going to be date. Okay, over here I'm going to have description, and that's just text or number. This is going to be payee. Okay, this is going to be category or match. Okay, and then I actually need another column or two. So let's just do text number, and the next one's going to be spent. This is going to become received. So I'm just following the columns exactly as they appear on the spreadsheet, right? And then I want to add in, I'm going to need an extra column on the right. And for now, I'm just going to leave this, but we'll call this completed for now. And I'll come back to that. Okay, now I can take this spreadsheet, and I'm just, on my other screen, I'm copying the whole thing, and I'm starting on this second column, and I'm going to paste it in. Control V to paste. Then it gets everything in there. Okay, I'm going to highlight these two columns and format them for currency, right? And then the primary column, what I want to do is I'll just call this item or question. So this is where basically I'm asking my client the question. I need to know what was this for, right? Bessie is a vendor. Was this a refund? Right. So I put the comment in there. Okay. Now, the beautiful thing about Smartsheet is, in some clients, if you don't instruct them accordingly, are going to sit there and they're going to try and type right into the, like this field here. So I usually take a minute to go through this with the client the first time I'm doing it with them. And if I click this little add a comment, this creates a comment thread specific to that whole row, right? So I encourage the client to come in, and the client will say, yes, this was a refund for unused something. Okay, great. And by the way, Smartsheet, I don't have time to go into great detail on this, but you can set it up so that you'll get notified the minute they respond to something like that, right? You'll get an email notification saying so-and-so has responded. You can also set it up to where you'll get a daily digest of all the things that changed, if anything changed. And if you don't get an email, it means nothing changed. The client hasn't done anything with it. So you'll get that response, and then you'll go into QuickBooks. And the completed field, you can do it one of two ways. You can do it as a date, which I prefer, because then I kind of mark that's the date that I actually went into QuickBooks and made the change. But you can also just do it as a checkbox, right? And so you say, okay, I'm just going to check it off once I know it was completed. And you can use this as a permanent ongoing project, because then I can always filter out all the ones that are marked completed, so that I'm always only looking at the ones that, still need help. Now, why do I do this instead of just putting them into uncategorized and letting the client deal with it? Because this will force me to keep these transactions here in this online banking queue, which on the one hand can be scary because it can feel like a mess, but it'll force the client's hand. Because now if the client says to me, hey, how come my bank account balances aren't up to date? And the simple answer is because I need your answers on the uncategorized stuff. In other words, that's how you're enforcing this with the client, is you're basically saying, I'm not going to update your banking until I get the information I need from you, because I don't want incomplete books that are going to accumulate for 6 months. And then the pressure goes back on me to get you to give me what I need. And of course, when the clients finally do get around to that, I have clients who work like this. They'll wait 6 months, then they'll go in and they'll answer it all. And then they expect me to just turn that around like overnight, right? So this is my way of trying to force the client's hand a little bit more in terms of getting me the information I need. And, this has been sitting here forever, the export to Excel. I don't know why I never played with it before, but one day it just occurred to me. That, hey, there's an export here. I wonder how I can use that. The other thing I want to make really clear here is that you have these filters, and these filters can be really useful to use, right? So I had a client recently that I was working on where I had like a year's worth of banking that had come into this queue and hadn't been added in. And I was just trying to do 1 month at a time. So this date filter alone was huge because I would filter it for just the month I wanted to go reconcile and just get all that banking done, and then go reconcile it and move on. So using these filters in the bank feeds area makes it's just huge. It makes a huge difference. And over here, you're going to do all transactions, or you can say only show me the recognized ones. And this is often my workflow. Is the first thing I want to do is deal with the recognized ones. Of course, I can further filter this by date, and that way, because usually this is quick, and I can just bang these out, and then I clear this filter out and deal with everything else, right? And another one to look at, we were just talking about this earlier this week, is the ones that say transferred, right? Because I never like to use transfers in QBO. I always like to use an actual expense or check type transaction, and then I'll just book it between the two balance sheet accounts. Because once you create something as a transfer, it is, first of all, it's very limited in terms of the detail you can provide about that transaction. There just isn't the space for it. But also, if you sometimes if you're not paying attention, QuickBooks Online will stick something in an uncategorized asset account as a transfer. And if I actually need to hit a P&L account with that, well, I can't do that in a transfer. A transfer will not allow me access to accounts that are on the P&L. So I have to delete that transaction. If it's been reconciled, I have to, upset the reconciliation. And then that part is so annoying. I have to upset the reconciliation and then fix it, by creating a whole new transaction, delete the original transfer, and then re-reconcile it. It creates a mess. So I almost never use the transfer transaction type, but doing this, with the filter, I can quickly identify all those and then click into them and make sure that I choose categorize instead of record as a transfer, right? Go away. So that's kind of my sort of quick drill down on the banking area, and some of the things you need to know. And again, I just want to stress that the section I built into the course on banking and bank feeds it's the most thorough thing I've ever seen on the subject of banking and bank feeds in terms of all the different ways you can get transactions in. I teach you how to use SASANT. I teach you how to use Excel to get things coded really quickly. So if you haven't yet, or if it's been a while, I encourage you to go back through that stuff. The other thing you're going to want to do right from the beginning is take the time to build your rules database, right? So my rule is that I create a rule for everything. This will only save time over time, right? The more you do this, the less you'll have to do it as time goes on. And you'll come to a point where, the bank feed process is going to be 5 to 15 minutes a week, and that's it, you're done. Because if you've created rules and you've done a good job of those, and again, very serious deep dive on that here, bank feed automation with detailed rules, parts 1 and part 2. Okay. If you take the time to do this, you'll pretty much automate the bookkeeping process. Now, I know some of you, even as you're creating the rule, like to check off the option that automatically adds it. I don't. I like to get the opportunity to review it first to be 1,000% sure that it's doing it right. But I know, Greg, I think you like to use that option, don't you?
Repeat the question.
Do you like to use this option where it automatically confirms the transaction where the rule applies?
Only if I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that is going to be the categorization of it. For example, if I know that I've configured the rule correctly where it says zoom.us and the amount equals $14.99, then yes, I'm going to push it through. But if the rule is created maybe that just says Zoom and it's going to create false positives. Let's say if the client uses LegalZoom for something, it's going to see the word Zoom in there, but because we haven't refined that search well enough, it's going to create a false positive in there.
Gotcha. Yep. And that's kind of why I just err on the side of not using this option.
And more recently, I've been doing that, is erring on the side of, yeah, let's just take an extra 2 seconds to double check that the rule is going incorrectly.
Yeah. So in other words, the only time to use it is when you're very, very confident that there's not going to be any potential for like a variation on the theme. Like Greg gave a perfect example, Zoom versus LegalZoom, where nothing like that can happen, and then you can set this option to automatically confirm it into the register. But like I said, I prefer, and it sounds like Greg does too, to at least give myself the chance to review it. In most cases, I can pretty much filter this for recognized transactions, click this guy up here, and just accept them all. Right? And so this, in this case, would knock out 13 transactions. Okay, then I'll remove the recognize filter, and that leaves me with another 11 that I have to go through one by one and code. Right? So that becomes a very quick process. And like I said, what will happen is most of us are sort of creatures of habit, and we record the same things to the same places because we spend money in the same places on the regular. So the more you take the time to build the rules, the less time you'll have to spend later on, babysitting the bank feeds. And that's going to free you up more time. I mean, we have clients. That's why when QuickBooks Live came out, I wasn't mad. I was like, first of all, this is perfect because these clients are eventually going to come my way to clean up the mess that QuickBooks Live created. And I can compete with them all day long because I can take those same sort of level of client, let's just call it, clients that are going to be paying $250 to $500 a month for bookkeeping services. And I can just create rules like crazy and pretty much automate their bookkeeping process. I can set up an automatic report group, right? I love that feature here. I can set an automatic report group that goes out to the client like clockwork. I'll set it up to include. So let's just do it real quick. We'll get the balance sheet in there. And we'll get the P&L in there for starters, right? So the way I like to do the balance sheet is total by month. Okay. And so now I'll save this, right? I'll create a new group. We'll call it weekly reports. I can't type. Add it. Save it. Do the same thing here with the P&L reports. Profit and loss. Again, I like to total it by month. Run it. Save it. Weekly reports and save. Back over to reports, custom reports. And I go over this in the course. Okay. And right now, so it's got the weekly reports group with my reports in it. And here I can go edit and I can set a schedule. And I can basically say, send this to the client every Friday at, you don't get to set the time, but send it every Friday. And they'll get the reports every Friday. So I can create a service very easily that competes with QuickBooks Live, and I can do a better job of it, frankly. And you can get these clients where you can just do it so efficiently, and you're charging them, $250 to $500 a month, just like QuickBooks Live does, and you're spending maybe 15 minutes a week maintaining it, and that's all you'll ever need, right? So 15 minutes a week times 4 weeks is what, 2 hours a month for $500? That's not a bad hourly rate, right? It's probably better than what most of you are charging already. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And that, my friends, is my deep dive on QuickBooks Online setup, chart of accounts, bank and credit card accounts, 1 hour deep dive. I just about made it. I went just 3 minutes over. So
But you started 5 minutes late. So
that's right. I started 5 minutes late, so I'm right on time.